let's first dive in and tell us about your work on the Civil Commission and why you established it.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you all for listening. And I really look forward to joining you next week and to flying to New York in a few days. So I'm an international law scholar. I teach international law, human rights, feminist theories, and I've been involved all my life in promoting women's rights and children's rights, especially here in Israel, but also more globally, and teaching about the importance of the human rights system that was really established from the ashes of World War II and of the Holocaust. And we found ourselves on October 7th struggling with the response of many UN organizations, which I personally teach of their importance, of their role in the world, in giving voice to universal values, in giving voice to the victims. And we felt like there is a very confused message coming out of the UN, especially as we had hostages taken very violently into Gaza. And we decided to take action. We started sending petitions and information and to really every UN organization about what happened to women and children. And for weeks, we didn't get any response. So it was this realization at a certain point that we have to start documenting everything ourselves, all the war crimes committed against women and children ourselves. Usually war crimes against women and children are the ones that are most silenced, that the information of disappears very quickly historically. So with that understanding, we started collecting information, collecting evidence, interviewing survivors, interviewing first responders, conducting testimonies, and working with global organizations, for instance, some that are in the US to help us preserve the historical truth about what happened on October 7th, fight for the hostages, get them back as quickly as possible, because we have found deep concern for what they are enduring in captivity, for the cruelty that they are still suffering, and also to perhaps collect information that will be able to use for accountability for legal processes around the world. And the decision was to establish an archive under the most compelling international standards. So today, this archive serves as a basis for us to advocate for the victims, share information about the sexual atrocities of October 7th, this gender-based crimes, the crimes committed against women and children, and this is what we're dedicated for.
And as you do this work, is there any update you can give or that you even know of the hostages who still remain in captivity?
Yeah, so unfortunately, every day that goes by, our concerns gets worse. Their situation is deteriorating. Most of them did not survive. We know that from those who returned from captivity, that they are suffering unbelievable cruelty and psychological cruelty, and of course their physical condition is deteriorating. Only last week, the Ministry of Health in Israel has released a report to the UN Rapporteur on Torture. The report revealed the testimonies of children that returned from captivity, teenagers and women that shared really horrific description of what they have encountered and difficult conditions that they were in. So every day, new information, even such that we didn't know of the torture that they, for instance, had to face sexual atrocities in front of one another, etc. So I'm sorry that it's difficult for me to get into detail, but I'm happy to share the report and also our report that we released only a couple of weeks ago.
And when you spoke before, the the UN last year, not long after the October 7th attacks, you did talk about this new term that's come about called Kinocide. Can you explain what that means in relation to wartime violence?
Yes, of course. So in the course of documenting all the war crimes against women and children, we started collecting really every piece of information, materials that Hamas took themselves. They documented themselves in the houses, committing those crimes, murdering people, executing them, taking children hostage. And we were reviewing piles of information to slowly start identifying videos and images of abuse of families. It was one family after the other. And we started seeing Hamas, they entered the houses. They documented themselves with GoPro cameras, entering the houses, family houses, executing some family members, making sure the others watch while they do it. For instance, I want to give you, and not only that, just a second, not only that, they uploaded those videos to the victim's social media accounts in ways that extended the cruelty to the closest relatives of the victims. And so when we started seeing another family and another family being abused, and I will give one example, for instance, the Dan family, you see the terrorists entering the house, they murdered their eldest daughter, Mayan. The house is covered with balloons of her 18-year-old birthday that she celebrated just a few days before the attack. And you see her little siblings screaming and her parents terrified, and they're sitting on the floor crying. And the entire ordeal is filmed by Hamas themselves. And we found ourselves physically unable to document this, physically unable to witness it. It was, I often say, if there is hell, this is how it looks like. Someone abusing your kids, someone abusing your loved one. It's one thing to know that you lost your son or daughter or brother. It's another thing to see it and to witness it in such a cruel way. And once we understood that we're seeing these crimes again and again and again, we started understanding that we must document this, that it wasn't incidental, that it was an organized attack. They didn't enter the house and randomly kill people. It was calculated. It was a strategy. We started collecting all the information, understanding that we see repeating patterns in different locations of the attack. And for instance, as I said, they murdered family members in front of one another. They separated family members. They vandalized the houses in a cruel, in a very, how would you say, they really spent a lot of time ruining the houses, burning them. I want to give one example, that the quote that opens the report of Rotem Matias. He's 15-year-old boy. He was interviewed right after the attack, and the quote is about how the terrorists entered their safe room, their bedroom, and then they killed his parents. They murdered his parents. They injured him. He was hiding under his mother's body, and he was telling the story and said, and then mom died on top of me. And his word just stayed with me for so long. The fact that he was hiding under his mother's body, and the really unbelievable thing is that they returned to the house to burn them. So they knew that they were already dead, and they returned to the house to burn it. So they wasted a lot of time in creating such a chaos or how would you say, like such a deep trauma, that we understood that we're seeing a unique evil, a distinct form of violence that was never recognized as such. And this is how we decided to coin this form of violence as kinocide. Kin as in familial relations, and side as in the systemicity of this abuse, the weaponization of families. We understood they made families their target. They wanted to target families as such. It wasn't random. It was a choice to create such a trauma that would last for generations to come.
That's such an impact. So people who will be coming to the summit will hear these kinds of stories, this research that you've been doing, and many of will ask, how can we help? How can we raise awareness? How can lawyers in New York help your work or do similar work with human rights? So thinking of those folks who will be asking that, what would you say to them?
That's an excellent question. So we found that this specific abuse has happened elsewhere in the world, that it's just the beginning of revealing a new phenomena of abuse of families. For instance, we met with victims from the Yazidi community, and when we shared with them, they immediately said, "This happened to me. And it happened to my family. They killed us in front of one another. They murdered my uncle. They murdered my aunt. I saw my brother." It was just this look in their eyes that we knew that this is important. This is important not just in the context of the Israeli situation, but for humanity itself. I think for me, the most important thing is that we give language to the victims to describe their suffering and their unique suffering, as I said. And I think our role now and US lawyers can help us raise awareness to this, share the report, share its findings, create conversations. We're happy to join webinars from afar or to come to the US to speak about this. We'll appreciate any support in research, pro bono work, donation. If financial support is the easiest support, it will be also very much appreciated. Connections to human rights groups. I want to also mention in the context of the sexual atrocities that Sheryl Sandberg has created this film, this documentary called Screams Before Silence. And I find that whereas we cannot share all the evidence that we have, for instance, because the families, it's a very sensitive information. Sometimes the families don't know this. The film is a great way to start a conversation in different communities about what happened. So the report can serve as a place, as a resource to start a conversation, to start an action around the world, and the film does that as well. So I encourage you to just help us raise awareness to these issues.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We are looking forward to seeing you and the other panelists on Wednesday, January 15th at our Presidential Summit at the New York Hilton Midtown. And safe travels, and we will see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer. I look forward to it.